Welcome back to another episode of the 1977 Toyota Celica Restomod project. Today's video is going to be a little bit different. I've gotten a lot of great questions about my plans for this build, so I wanted to take some time to introduce myself, give a little bit of background, and talk about my plan for this car. My name's Kyle. I'm a gearhead. I have been for longer than I had a driver's license, and this is a little different than any project that I've worked on in the past. I've had supercharged USDM vehicles. I've had turbocharged imports. Big Subaru guy. Back in 2011, I got a 2005 STI. I had that for about 8 years. Ended up with a built engine, rotated twin scroll turbo setup, and it made about 430 at the wheels, and it was fantastic. It was awesome to drive on track. I was in this weird place. It became hard for me to drive it on the street, just take it to work, because it was a big production. I was always worried that something would happen to it, but also I couldn't drive it to the full extent that I wanted to. So it turned into just never driving it. Anyhow, back to the Celica. I came of age in the Fast and Furious era, the first movie, the second movie, and I wanted a 7th generation Toyota Celica, and I didn't end up getting one, and things would have probably been different had I ended up with one of those. I would have done some really stupid things, body kits, and if you're here, you know what the trends were at that time. So my dad actually had Celicas in the 80s as well. He had, I think, 3 third gens. I don't know all the trims and everything, but the one that I do remember, it was a blue GTS. As a kid, I thought it was a cool car. Looking back now, I'm like, that's a really cool car. But about 5 years ago, a little longer now, I kind of got this bug for restomodding a first generation Toyota Celica. And around that same time, Dave from Speed Academy actually launched his build, and I was like, this is a sign, this is the thing to do. These cars are really cool, and there's other people doing this, so we can all learn from each other, and it kind of solidified that. So now I'm here, I've got this first gen. My plan for this car has changed a bit since I got it. I bought it sight unseen, and knew that it was going to need some work. And as we got into it, found more rust than expected, which it's a 45-year-old car, that happens. But I do have a general plan for this car. I have a spreadsheet here on the computer set up next to me to kind of keep me on point. I just wanted to go over that today because I've gotten some really great questions about what my plans are for this build. So I figured I'd walk you guys through it, and I have some questions. I would love to get feedback on certain things because I'm in the very beginning stages of this build, of this project, and I have a lot to learn. This is a relatively new platform to me. I've been lurking on first gen Celica's forum and on Facebook groups for the last 5 years or so, but now I'm really into it. So I guess we'll start with the exterior because that's what you can see. If you've seen our previous videos, you know that this car has pretty significant rust through in the floor pans, the inner rockers, the outer rockers, in the trunk, in the rear wheel wells. And as I look at it a little closer, there's some pretty significant rust around the windshield cowling at the back. There's some body work that was done on the roof. I'm a little concerned about what I'm gonna find when I strip the paint and filler off of that. So a lot of body work to do. I am planning on doing the TRD style front lip, TRD style fender flares, TRD style rear spoiler. But other than that, like exterior wise, these cars are beautiful. I love the 70s aesthetic. So my plan is keep that 70s aesthetic, but modernize just about everything else. Oh, and I need to get smiley bumpers for this thing because these 5-mile-per-hour crash safety bumpers are hideous. And let's be honest, if this thing's in an accident, it's not gonna fare well. It will get a roll cage. I will definitely drive this car on track, but I'm not building it as a track car. I know that there's some considerations that come with driving a car that has a roll cage on the street, so that will be taken into consideration in the design and implementation of the different things we do with this car. So yeah, I'm looking at Toy Sport for the fiberglass spoilers and flares. I know a lot of people have used those and have been really happy with them. KF Vintage JDM, they do stamped steel smiley bumpers. So I'll probably go that route. I know that there are fiberglass options as well, and maybe I'll go that route. I like the idea of the lighter weight, but I feel like the stamped steel is going to look a lot better. Don't know if I'll paint them or go chrome. I'm not a huge chrome fan, but I feel like on a car like this, like the chrome is okay. It looks very appropriate. We'll see when we get there. There's a company in Australia, ADM Retro Fiberglass, and they do hoods and trunk lids, among other things. The hood on this car has some really significant rust at the leading edge, and some other rust issues. The trunk's actually in pretty good shape, but you know, lighter weight, won't rust. I'm good with all of that. Wheels, I haven't decided yet. I'm kind of leaning toward either like a Hayashi Street or RS Watanabe style wheel. I'm not sure what the specs that I'm going to go with exactly are, but you know, that's another thing that we'll deal with when we get there. And then, you know, the rest will be pretty stock. Probably update the lighting to, you know, more modern options, but still ones that retain the aesthetic. I do have a set of flat lights for this, which I'm really excited about. That's pretty much the plan for the exterior. The interior is, I have no idea at this point. The interior on this car, again, if you saw our previous videos, it was trashed. The seats are all eaten up, the foam's destroyed. Reupholstering is not really an option with what I have right now. And for the front seats, I would definitely want to do something with more bolstering and support anyhow. Some sort of reclining bucket seat would be nice. I don't want a fixed back seat because I do plan to drive this car, you know, on the weekends or nice days. And I don't necessarily want the, you know, okay, climb over the roll cage, get into the fixed back seat, put on the 5-point harness and set up the Hans device and all of that. That's, you know, I don't want to be in full track mode every time I drive this car. So a nice set of reclining buckets with extra bolstering would be nice. I know that I might run into some fitment issues. Dave from Speed Academy, I'll probably end up, you know, mentioning your build quite a few times. It's been an inspiration to say the least. But I know he had some issues with seat fitment, and I need to figure out if I'm gonna have clearance for my head, especially with a helmet on. So seats, undecided. I know that like Corbeau has some affordable options. A friend of mine recently just mentioned that he got a nice set of Brahm seats, which is a newer brand, and I'm not sure what their credentials are. Backseat, I don't know. I have a backseat that's in okay shape. I don't know if I'm going to be able to fit it with the roll cage. We'll see how that goes when we get there. It would be nice to have the option. Harnesses, we don't know. Some other stuff. Window regulators, door pins, all that stuff needs to be replaced. There's a shop, Coniglio 1975 or something like that, I think, that has like complete rebuild kits for window regulators, doors, all sorts of weather stripping. I'm gonna need all of that stuff because it's all toast in this. It's not gonna have HVAC, so I'll probably look into some sort of like resistive heater with a blower fan just in case it's like a chillier day. This isn't going to be a car that I drive like below 40 Fahrenheit. So look into all that. Oh, should we do the chassis or the drivetrain? These are kind of the big ones. Let's talk about the chassis first. Actually, no, let's talk about the drivetrain first. So starting with the big question, what engine am I going to go with? The 20R is coming out, that's for sure. It's still in there right now. I haven't had a chance to pull it yet, but I do have the hoist here and I'm going to try to get that out. You know, in the coming weeks or months, probably more realistically. I'm looking at a couple different options for engines. The Beams 3SGE is a great swap for these cars. There's a good amount of support for them, and they sound fantastic, especially with like the 4AGE ITBs on them. So that's like really tempting, and I'm kind of leaning that direction. But it is a JDM motor that's harder to get parts for. It was used in the Altezza, however you say it, RS200 in Japan, and that's it. They're out there, you can get them, and places like Battle Garage have timing kits and gaskets and your general maintenance items that you would need to, you know, keep an engine like that going. But the long-term availability of stuff like that, I'm not sure of. So that's kind of like a consideration. The thing that seems tempting is to do like a K-swap and make like, you know, 240 at the wheels, but I'm not familiar with many people that have done that swap. There's probably someone out there that has, but I don't know what kind of support there is as far as like getting the engine in there, what engine mounts do you use, what transmission do you go with, engine management, stuff like that. So that's something that again, is a consideration. But K-Series, they're everywhere. You can get parts, at your local auto parts store, online, whatever. It's super easy to find parts for, so that's appealing. And the K-Series, has more power potential. These cars, I think, 77 was rated for like around 100 horsepower at the crank. Any modern engine is gonna at least double that, and that will be more than enough. I'm gonna do what I can to keep this car relatively light. I don't need, tons and tons of power. I just want it to be fun. I want it to drive well, and that's most important to me. So choosing the engine comes with a bunch of questions too. What do I do for a clutch, flywheel, transmission, rear axle? I know there's a few options. The Ford 8.8-inch rear end from like the late 90s, early 2000s Explorers are readily available with factory limited slip. There's tons and tons of parts available for them. Rebuild kits and different gear ratios. There's an abundance of that axle. You can go pick one up from your local pull apart or wherever relatively inexpensively. And the rear disc brake, which takes care of some other stuff that I would want to do anyhow. But it's kind of overkill. It's big, it's heavy. This car is not going to make enough power to need that beefy of an axle, but we'll see. It kind of will come down to availability and pricing. Some other options are the AE86 6.7 rear axle, Supra axles, I think like the MA46, 47. I've seen people talking about Tacoma axles that are 7.5 inch. I don't know what the differences are between, like the truck axles and the car axles, if any. The Toyota Previa axles, those are like 7.5 inch axles as well. So I need to look into that more. We'll figure that out again when we get there, and maybe the engine choice will factor into what axle I end up going with, or it might just be like an availability and price point type thing. Radiator, that's easy. Koyo makes a drop-in radiator for this chassis. Whatever engine I do end up going with, I'll do what I need to for other cooling, oil coolers, any sorts of lines and pieces associated with that. ITBs would be sweet no matter what engine I end up going with. So like that's, again, a factor in the engine choice. And if I go with the beams, the 4AGE throttle bodies are relatively inexpensive as far as ITBs go. If I go with like a K-Series, there are plenty of options, but they're more expensive. So we'll figure all that out. Exhaust is gonna have to be custom. The K-Series, I believe the exhaust routes down the right side, which is the opposite of what this was originally, but I am going to convert this over to rack and pinion. So clearing that steering rack with the exhaust is going to be a factor. So I'll have to do something custom there for sure. Header, that'll be engine dependent. ECU, if I go with the beams, panic wire is hands down the way to go. And again, I'm not sure what people are using for engine management with K-Series or other options. So again, a lot of this kind of hinges on that decision. Fuel pump and fuel lines, probably like an AEM 320 liter per hour pump. Fuel pressure regulator, I'll probably do a C5 combo filter regulator. And the rest of the fuel system, the tank in this doesn't seem too bad. I need to take it out, inspect it, and probably refurbish it, refinish it. I think KBS and Port 15 both have gas tank restoration kits, so I need to look into those a little bit more. Catch can and all the lines associated with that, that'll depend on the engine as well. And gaskets, I'll probably do a refresh on whatever engine I do end up going with. That leaves us with the plan for the chassis. And if I go with the beams, I have it all planned out already. Again, if I go with a different engine, then that kind of changes a few things up, but the excessive AE86 cross member would be perfect if I go with the beams engine. Their mounts would be perfect. I am going to go with a lot of Techno-Toy tuning parts, their lower control arms. I actually have their ultimate quick ratio rack on order, so that should be here relatively soon. As far as converting like the steering column, Dave from Speed Academy once again has some really great videos on how to convert to rack and pinion, and I think he ended up using like an AW11 MR2 parts of that steering column. So I'll have to source that, and there's going to be some fabrication and welding involved with that. Again, Techno-Toy tuning for like the front tension arms, roll center kit, tie rod end, steering knuckles, front hubs. If I do the Ford 8.8 axle, that will give me 5x114 disc in the rear. So I would at that point then convert the front to 5x114 as well. I'm pretty sure that's an option that Techno-Toy tuning offers. If I go with a 4x114.3 axle, then I'll obviously match that in the front, and that'll affect wheel choices as well. You know, front sway bar and end links, I want to do something there. For the rear axle, I'll probably end up going with Techno Toy Tuning's links and panhard bar. Independent rear suspension would be cool. I would love to have the adjustability, the more responsive feeling. You don't have the axle shifting from side to side through its travel like you would with a panhard setup. But this isn't a car where fractions of a second in lap time are going to matter. So I'll probably stay with the solid rear axle just to keep things simple. Independent rear suspension is a lot of weight too, with, you know, the subframe and all the mounting points and reinforcements to the body. I've looked at trying to convert from the panhard bar setup to like a Watts link to keep the axle centered through its the suspension travel. We'll figure that out. And speaking of the suspension, definitely going to go with like a full coilover adjustable setup. Probably like Fortune Auto. I know there's some other, I think Techno Toy Tuning actually has a coilover option as well. I have to look into all that, but again, that's farther down the road. Front brakes, probably do the Techno Toy Tuning kit that a lot of people do. Rear brakes will depend on what axle I end up going with. And yeah, roll cage, that's going to have to be custom fabricated. This car needs basically a ground up refresh. All the bushings, all the mounting points, everything needs to be replaced and inspected. With the rust that I'm dealing with, I just want to make sure that the chassis is solid, so there's probably going to be a lot of cutting and welding and reinforcement happening. This is actually a great thing to ask. Is there an easy way to just check the frame's not bent without towing it to a frame shop? If I have to do that, then that's what I'll do. But I was reading that you can like put the car up in the air and measure both straight line and diagonally across from the front to rear wheel centers, and, you know, see if those measurements match up or not. So much of this project is going to change, you know, as I get into it. That was one thing that I learned with the 8 years of the STI, was that it's great to have a plan, but it's not going to go as planned. So as long as I'm making some sort of progress, like, I'll be happy. I don't really have like a date in mind that this car has to be completed by. It'll get done when it gets done. I would like to have it running and mobile within the next 2 to 3 years. The body work is a whole nother thing. I'll do the necessary work, making sure that the floor and the rockers and the chassis is solid, but like paint and finishing, I have no idea. I don't know what color I'm gonna paint this car. It might get wrapped so I can change it up if I want to, or maybe I'll be ready to commit to a color by the time we get to that point. This whole car is gonna get taken down to bare metal, so the world is my oyster. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I guess, what recommendations do you all have for me getting into this project? Have you converted your Celica to independent rear suspension? Have you put aftermarket seats in? What did you do for mounting points? What should I do for the bodywork? If you've been here, then you know 100% more about this than I do. So if you want to follow along with this build, click the subscribe button. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up. That's cool. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your suggestions. If you have any questions for me, post them in the comments. I talked a lot about the engine, but actually I've got some things in motion. Not ready to spill the beans on that quite yet, but that's coming up soon. And that's all I have for today. So stay tuned. See you next time.